DoorDash works with over 100,000 restaurants today and will continue to invest in working with more restaurants and offering a very broad selection. And in that sense, we mimic Main Street. And if Main Street wants more farm-to-table restaurants, then there should be more farm-to-table restaurants available on DoorDash. And if Main Street in a different area wants a greasy burger place, then that should also be available on DoorDash.
I think, to your point, I think that the ultimate consumer and our customer is going to decide, but I think that transparency will continue to be more and more of a value. I think it will continue to be more mainstream, and I think that to think otherwise would probably be naive. I think that it's our job then, since we are giving them the food or selling them the food, we've got to get that transparency out there. It's important.
So I've got a question. So could people put up their hands if they have had food delivered from a restaurant in, say, the last 30 days? Okay, so keep your hands up if you know where that restaurant got their food. So it's a very small percentage, but that information is available now. Most people don't care.
Right.
And so I think that's going to be very interesting, whether just because it's available and easier to get at, that will make people care.
I think basically the reason that this information is important is for food security and safety reasons. I mean, there's mandates that we have to really know all that. And also tracking and tracing back through the food system if there's a recall or an issue.
Recalls, so exactly.
Really, really, really important. So one of the things that comes up if you've had food delivered to you, which many of you have, is this whole issue of packaging and waste. There's been a lot of that written. In order to keep it safe, in order to keep it, in good shape, there is this packaging issue. So how do you feel about the progress being made on the whole packaging front? I mean, is it fixable? Is it just something that has to be because of the food safety? Or what are the opportunities there for innovation?
Well, I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunities. So if many of us have probably seen the study about meal kits, and something like 40% of them arriving out of temperature for when they're at your door, and those things are way over packaged or packaged, highly packaged to protect that temperature. So it hasn't been solved yet, and I do think that any time the supermarket is going to grow up around the ability to aggregate all this food for you as a consumer, and by taking them out of the equation in some of these cases, that packaging has to get shifted. And I don't think we're anywhere near solving that at the last mile point. I think there are probably plenty of opportunities for innovation there, but I haven't seen anything that's all that meaningful.
You also mentioned food waste, Robin, which I think is a problem that logistics companies and last mile logistics companies in particular are well positioned to solve, because it's easy to think of matching, maybe not easy, but it's the matching of surplus food to nonprofits and other places in need exists, but moving the food can be a logistical challenge and could be a bit of a nightmare for a restaurant to do themselves, as an example. So I do think that there's positioning there and a great opportunity to solve some problems in communities, particularly with food waste. And one thing that we've done recently, in addition to responding to disasters like Hurricane Harvey to try to make some donations to shelters and food banks, is to also spawn up a program to help provide the logistics and the last mile delivery from restaurants with excess food to local banks. So we launched Project Dash in January in a hack together, classic startup way, and we're investing in that as well. I think there's a long way to go, but since then we've done meal donations and partnered with Feeding America, and I think it's something that often comes out of a hack or a hackathon, which is a much bigger, broader product with a lot of promise.
On that same front, for those that are familiar with Walmart and kind of how in those situations we're incredibly giving, And not just because we're big, because anything we do seems to be big, but from the standpoint of percentages. And so I think that that is important when we look at food waste and making sure that it is getting put to good use. But I think that there's also a lot that we can do to make sure that when someone purchases something, that it lasts long enough for them to not have to throw it away. And that what I'm in a store are providing for the customer is what they're expecting from a standpoint of home life. And so that they're not throwing it away, because then at that point I'm not able to donate it or give it to someone else that can use it from a philanthropic standpoint. And so I think there's a lot we can do to start thinking from packaging standpoint and from a freshness standpoint, that if I'm getting a pound of food, I want that pound of food to be eaten. And that needs to be all the way through to the consumer in the way we measure it, not just what I sell, but how it is consumed. And so I think there's a lot, both in the packaging and in the freshness world.
Why food is really different than other supply chains.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So how much does size have to do with all of this? I mean, we're all various, small, medium-sized companies in this business, and the whole food system is going through this sort of change from big singular companies to smaller companies operating across the food supply chain. So do you need scale in order to do this well, I guess is the basic question. Do you need to be a big company? Or is it the whole industry evolving towards getting smaller and smaller and smaller, maybe acting bigger, in other words, using big logistical supply chains, but in the way they behave and how they curate more personal delivery choices and more personal options? Will it be sort of like small is the new sort of scaling of the whole food delivery and logistics business? And as maybe a second part of that question is, where does the role of partnerships play in how this industry will be structured down the road? In other words, will you be having a small purveyor, a small company partnering with a big one? I mean, there's a lot of partnership things going on in terms of how these industries are being structured. So maybe you could comment a little bit on how you see size or scale being important in what our food landscape will look like.
I think it depends on the company's goal. At DoorDash, we have pretty ambitious goals. We're in 600 cities today, planning to be in 1,600 cities by the end of 2018. You mentioned partnerships, and we work with 90% of the top 100 national restaurants that do delivery. So it's a big vision. There's a lot of work left to do. But it is important to be able to operate at scale and to show our partners that we are able to execute and that the model works and that we're delivering a quality experience with speed. And to do all of those together, I do think requires scale and size.
I feel like that's a trick question for me. I think that there's always a place for incubator companies and innovation, and that's the way it works, right? From our perspective, we have partnerships with all kinds of sizes of companies, and I think that we know what we're not good at. If someone else is good at it, then why? That's fine. So I don't think scale is a requirement. I think that it probably is more efficient in some cases, not always. But I don't know that it would be a requirement.
And I think I agree with that. And just addressing the first part of your question, you can have very efficient innovation at a small scale or at a large scale. And I don't think that either are the best way to go. I do think that with a company like Walmart or an Amazon, when they decide to do something, they can be much more impactful overall. So Walmart, was probably more than 10 years ago, had a really big initiative about getting packaging waste out of their supply chain, and that was bigger than anything that any other company could have done. And so I think to drive some of those things, it has to be done from a large company, but I do think there's room for small companies to innovate and still be meaningful.
So you wonder if let's go with the small company idea. So you have delivery companies that are delivering basic groceries. You've got delivery companies that are delivering ice cream and cheese and wine, all these things. And so basically, as a consumer, conceivably could almost be having a traffic jam coming up your driveway, right? I mean, not enough parking space because you're having this flow of goods coming to your house. Beautiful, wonderful, curated food. But we all know that, I mean, even that picture doesn't quite look right. I mean, just in terms of, carbon footprint, et cetera. So what are your thoughts about ways just the basic delivery vehicle, whether it's a drone, whether it's a, whatever, or whether or not you all get together and use the same truck. I mean, there's a lot of trucks driving around half empty. So is there a better way, just in terms of the vehicles themselves, the delivery means, that can serve the customers who seem to be leaning towards more deliveries than fewer deliveries? But what are your thoughts?
I do think that drones, autonomous vehicles, all these things will play a big role. I mean, the ultimate question is there's a fixed cost to the delivery, and there's a margin on the goods that the manufacturer or the retailer needs to make. And as long as there's still marginal profit on the order that is greater than the cost of that fixed cost of the delivery, it will happen. And but I think it's very difficult to do that right now. So I won't get into DoorDash's economics, I don't know them, but like if you assume that it costs $5 to make a delivery, if you assume it costs $10 to make a delivery, that only makes sense if there's enough margin for the restaurant to eat that, basically. And until those fixed costs come down, regardless of whether it's an autonomous vehicle or a drone or any other super efficient way to do it, the number of deliveries will be capped. And I don't know any other way around that.
You just say supply and demand and economics will drive it.
I think so.
Okay.
I do think the model works, though, and I think that part of it is to increase efficiency over time. And we've worked at DoorDash with autonomous vehicles in some capacity for about 3 years because we're a technology company at heart, and we have pilots that are scaling and active in areas like the Bay Area in California and in DC as well, because whatever the system of products is to complete last mile delivery, DoorDash plans to be a part of it, and we want to pursue that. It's an additional challenge if you think about robot delivery or an autonomous vehicle delivery, for example, because you have to solve the first 10 feet and the last 10 feet as well. Somebody has to get the food into the vehicle and then also out of the vehicle. So I think it will take time, but I think it is certainly something that we're working on. And I think it's an interesting part of the future of last mile logistics.
I look at it as just a massive logistics problem that, innovative and smart people will figure out. Because if that's what the customer is asking for, the consumer, we'll all go figure it out.
All right, good, that's good news.
Yeah.
So
their job.
will the ease of delivery and the cost related to that make a difference in what we're all eating? In other words, if it's very efficient to get fresh fish delivered to your door in 30 minutes, will we all eat more fresh fish? In other words, how will that delivery affect actually what we're eating?
I think it does. I think it already does. And I think right now it's probably not for the better. If people are eating a lot more restaurant food, I think it's pretty well known that that's going to have higher fat, it's going to have higher salt, it's going to have higher sugar, and for all the flaws of the labeling system that we have now, when you get products from a supermarket, most of those orders from a restaurant you don't know at all. You don't have that data at all. And so I do think that ease, again, removes people, even though in theory it should make things more direct. So I do think that the diet that we're cooking less, we're shopping for ourselves less, I think that is already impacting what we eat.
was,